What kind of reader am I? Well, we are about to find out. Today I am doing the reader profile tag. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life. Today I am back with another tag video. I was tagged by the lovely Berna at Berna's Bookish Adventures to do the reader profile tag. And these questions are so fun. But without further ado, grab your hot beverage of choice. I have my Yorkshire Gold tea here, and we will dive right into the question. First question for this tag is, what for you makes a good book? Okay, for me, a good book has a good mix of both plot and character. And while I'll read books that are mostly plot driven or mostly character driven, my sweet spot is the intersection of the two of those things. And then I also really want well-written dialogue. One of my biggest pet peeves as a reader is to stumble across a book where the dialogue feels like nothing anybody would say in real life. And then I really love books that are life-affirming. You all know that I love a good cozy read, something that feels comforting to me. And I really just want, even if the story has hard things in it or deals with a hard topic, I want it to be overall life-affirming. In the end, I'd much rather feel hopeful than I would feel desolate. And one of my other big pet peeves in novels, particularly modern novels, is what I have termed the apathetic main character, where the main character just cannot seem to get out of their own way. And I understand that 100% that is what people go through. I just don't want to read about it necessarily in a novel when I want to escape. And then I really want a satisfying denouement. And satisfying doesn't necessarily mean to me that it's tied up neatly in a bow and everybody, walks off hand in hand in the sunset. I don't necessarily need that. The ending can be ambiguous. It can be left a little bit open. I just want it to feel like the ending is sort of the natural conclusion of where we are in the story. Second question, what are you currently reading? I thought today I would just share the 3 books that I am actively reading right now. And the first one is Murder is Easy by Agatha Christie. This is my pick for the Read Christie 2024 April book. We were to pick a book published in the 1930s, and I believe Murder is Easy was published in 1939, I think. 1939. So just under the wire with this one, and I have just barely begun, and I am intrigued to see where we go. And then the next book I am reading is Anne of Green Gables, the graphic novel. I checked this out from the library because I just finally watched the Anne of Green Gables mini series from the 1980s, the one with Megan Follows, which I can't believe I've never seen before, but I think I've mentioned here that I didn't grow up reading Anne of Green Gables. It was one of those series that just sort of passed me by, and then I think the mini series came out right as I was on the cusp of becoming a teenager, and I was probably just not that interested at that moment in time, and so I didn't watch it. And it's just been one of those things that I've been wanting to watch, especially when I read Anne of Green Gables, I don't know, about 10-15 years ago, and just never have. So finally I checked the DVD out from the library, so I watched it, finished it this weekend, and I loved it so much, and it made me love Anne of Green Gables the books even more. And I also had checked this out from the library at the same time, and I just dove right in as soon as I finished the DVDs, and I am enjoying the graphic novel version of Anne of Green Gables. And then the last book that I'm currently reading, I just decided to pick up. I've had it sitting on the table next to my chaise lounge here in my reading room, and my mom gave this to my son for his birthday, and it is such a cute little book. And since April is National Poetry Month, I decided to pick this up. and this is called Oh, It's You, Love Poems by Cats. And this is by Francesco Marciuliano, I'm gonna go with. If you are a cat owner and cat lover, this is a hilarious little collection. I'm really, really enjoying this, and I just started it yesterday. I'm gonna probably finish it today. It's a very quick little read, but if you wanted some quick little poetry and you're a cat lover, this is a good one. All right, next question. Question 3, what's the last book you didn't finish and why? I talked about this book in my video where I talked about all of the books that I'm currently in the middle of right now. And I mentioned then that I was thinking about giving up on this book. And I have finally decided that I think I am going to give up on it. It's not that it's a terrible book. I just think it's not a book that I need to read. And that is How to Read Literature Like a Professor. The subtitle is A Lively and Entertaining Guide to Reading Between the Lines by Thomas C. Foster. I think for me, pretty much all of the things he's talking about in here, I learned in high school and college. I think if you are just starting out learning how to analyze literature, this could be just kind of a good overview for you. I don't have any impetus to want to pick this up and continue on with it. So I think I'm just going to pass this along. I think I'm going to put it in a little free library in my neighborhood, and hopefully somebody will find it who could really benefit from it. Question 4 is, what obscure book do you wish other people would read? I love this question because I love to talk about books that I don't hear talked about very much in other places. And I decided to pull 3 books off of my shelf that I don't often hear talked about. That's not to say never, but I think they're just a little more off the radar, and I wanted to mention them here. The first book that I want to talk about is a very, very slim little book, and that is Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor. This is an epistolary novel, and it is set in the 1930s, right as Hitler is coming into power. And this is a letter between Max, who is a Jewish art dealer in San Francisco, and Martin, who is his friend and former business partner who's returned to Germany. And it is so powerful. I think it's a really wonderful way to look at how Hitler came to power and how sort of insidious Nazism and fascism was, and how it became so prevalent because people did nothing and they said nothing. And that's really a lot of what this book is saying. And you can read this in one very short little sitting, and I think it will leave a huge impact on you. And I can't recommend it enough. And then next is a book which I know I've mentioned on here before, but I'm going to mention it again because I really think it's wonderful. And that is The Red Notebook by Antoine Lorraine. And this is a little slim French book. And this is about a bookseller, and he stumbles across a abandoned handbag, woman's handbag, and he picks it up. And inside it, there really isn't any identification as to who it belongs to, but there is this red notebook. And inside of it, it's got handwritten thoughts and jottings and notes and just all kinds of random, pieces of information that this woman wrote down. And so Laurent, who is the bookseller, decides to take it upon himself to try to find her. And this story is so lovely. Just wonderful. I can't wait to reread this one because I loved it so much. The next book is one where the plot doesn't sound like it would make for an interesting read, and yet it really, really is. And that is Appointment with Venus by Gerard Tickle. And this book, I think I first heard about on Miranda Mills's channel. She talked about it. This has been republished by Manderley Press. The plot of this book is that the British are going to rescue a pregnant, pedigreed cow from a Channel island. It's a fictional Channel island called Arkell, and the Germans have taken control of the island, and so they have to sneak in and get this cow back to England. And it is an adventure story and sort of a spy, a bit of a thriller. And it was so much fun. Such an engaging read. I can't recommend this enough. I think it is just lovely and fun, and you are on the edge of your seat, hoping and praying that everything works out for Venus. Venus is the cow, and for all the characters involved, and it's just lovely. The next question 5 is, what's the longest book you've ever read? The longest book that I have read is Edge of Eternity by Ken Follett, and this is book 3 in his Century trilogy, which includes The Fall of Giants is the first book, Winter of the World is the second book, and then Edge of Eternity is the third book. And they are all chunky monkeys. But Edge of Eternity, I think, just edges the others out at a little over 1,100 pages. So it is quite a doorstop of a book. And I really loved Fall of Giants. It is an epic, sweeping saga of a novel that spans decades and multiple families. The whole trilogy spans a huge period of time. I think if you are going to read them, you should read them in fairly quick succession so that you can stick with the storylines and you don't forget who the characters are, because each time for the second and the third books, I had to get back in and reinvested in the characters. And so I think that might have taken away from my enjoyment. But if you like a good, sweeping, epic story, that is it. Question 6 is, if you could have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would they be? This was really hard to narrow down. So I just picked 5 that came to the top of my head. And the first one is Judith Dunbar from Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. I love Judith. I would love to be friends with Judith. I think she would be just fun to be around and chat with. My second pick is Eleanor Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. Eleanor is one of my favorite Jane Austen characters. I feel like we are very simpatico. We would just be a bit of kindred spirits, Eleanor and I. And I would just love to sit down with her and, yes, have dinner or tea or whatever and chat. And then the third character I would like to have at my dinner party is Mrs. Polifax from the Mrs. Polifax Mysteries by Dorothy Gilman. I am really in love with Mrs. Polifax, and I so enjoyed the first book, and I think she would just be such a fun, interesting character to talk about her adventures. And I mean, who wouldn't love to meet a woman who in her 60s decides to go and volunteer her services to the CIA? Brilliant. And then also in kind of a similar vein, I have to include Hercule Poirot. I love Poirot. I like Miss Marple too very much, but I've read so many of the Poirot stories and I just adore him. I know he's a little obnoxious and a little full of himself, but I still love him anyway. And I just love the way his little gray cells work. And I think he would be a really fun addition to the dinner party, though he'd be the only man there. So maybe my husband can come to the dinner too. And then the last character I would like to include is Barbara Bunkle from Miss Bunkle's book and subsequent sequels, because I just love her. She's so fun. She's so funny. And she just is a delight. I think she'd just be really interesting to converse with. Moving on to the next question. Question 7 is 5 books you'd want if you were stranded on a desert island. I picked some chunkers because if I'm stranded on a desert island, I want to have books I can sink my teeth into. First up, because it said books, and this is one single book, I picked Jane Austen, 7 novels. This should keep me busy for a little while. I just can't imagine not being without Jane Austen if I was stranded on a desert island. I love her books, and I think they can be read and reread and reread and reread, and you'll get new things out of them every time you read them. And then the next book I picked, because I feel like if I was stranded on a desert island, I would need to escape sometimes, and I would probably want to go to England. And so I'm going to go there with Susan Branch. And this is a fine romance, falling in love with the English countryside, where Susan goes on her first trip to England. And then they take the Queen Mary ship from the east coast of the US to England. And then they tour all around England and find all these lovely literary sites and places that she wanted to visit. And it is just filled with delight. Plus, it's just her artwork, and her books are handwritten. They are just beautiful. I think this would give me much, much comfort if I was stranded on a desert island. I definitely picked things that are comfort reads for me. And then I just mentioned Judith Dunbar in my prior answer to the last question, and I would definitely include Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. It was really hard to decide between this and The Shell Seekers, and either one of them really would do. I would definitely read them. They are, again, very chunky, sort of sweeping novels, and I think they're just stories you can get lost in. And yes, I'm going to stay Coming Home because it's such a wonderful book. And then next I had to pick my favorite book of all time, because how can I be on a desert island without my favorite book? And that is Happy All the Time by Laurie Colwin. I have talked about this multiple times on here. I love it. I couldn't love it more if I tried. Holly and Guido and Vincent and Misty, I love them. I love their stories. I love Laurie Colwin's writing. This is just the best. This is my perfect little comfort book, and I'm looking forward. I'm going to reread it this year, and I'm very excited. The last book that I would take with me if I was stranded on a desert island would be The Thornbirds by Colleen McCullough. Again, another sweeping, epic story. This one set in Australia. And I couldn't believe when I read this how much I loved it. And I still need to watch the miniseries, but I absolutely loved this book, and I'm going to need to reread it. I don't know if it'll be this summer, but maybe next summer. It's such a fantastic story. And yes, this would keep me immersed if I was stranded somewhere. The next question, question 8, is one book you could not put down. This is a book that is not going to be for everyone. And I think it is also a book that is maybe one of those that could be the right book at the right time if you're in the right mood for it. And that is Matrix by Lauren Groff. In Matrix, we follow the story of a 12th century prioress who has been banished from the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine and deemed unmarriageable, and she is sent off to live in this abbey. And it doesn't really sound like it would be something that was riveting and unputdownable, and yet it absolutely was. I was just in the right mood for this, and I had been going through a period where I had read a number of novels about nuns, and this was another one that just blew me away. I think Lauren Groff's writing in this is pristine. It tells an epic story of this woman's life over a long period of time, even though it's not a particularly long book. And yet it doesn't feel like anything is left out or missing. It is incredibly character driven. Not a ton happens in this book. You just live this life of this prioress. It's sort of how she wrestles with control of her world, despite the fact that she's not a man, at a time when not being a man meant you didn't have very much power. And yet she figures out a way to have power of her own. And it's fascinating. And I'll just read you a little quote from this book, which I think really exemplifies Lauren Groff's writing in this. And it says, "For it is a deep inhuman truth that most souls upon the earth are not at ease unless they find themselves safe in the hands of a force far greater than themselves. Just fantastic. I recommend this with some caveats. And second to last question, this is question 9, and that is 5 books or authors you will never read. And for this, I decided to add the word again to the end of the question because I really feel like if I haven't read an author, I have a really hard time saying I would never read them because you just never know where your reading life is going to take you. And I would hate to say, oh, I'm never going to read that book or that author. So I think a couple of these fall in the I've never read them or anything by that author. And the others are authors that I have read or tried, and for one reason or another, I'm not going to read them again. And I'm pretty darn sure about that. The first author that I'm not going to read again is Maggie O'Farrell. And I know lots of people love Maggie O'Farrell. She's a well-respected writer writing today, but she is not for me. I have read This Is the Place, I think was the first thing of hers I read, which was funny because it was actually set partly in the town I grew up in, which was just bizarre. And then again, it's got a little bit of that apathetic character thing that I don't like. And then I tried to read Hamnet and I couldn't. I mean, the first whole section of that book is kids in peril and unable to find an adult to help them. And that is such a big trigger no for me. Hamnet, not for me. I can appreciate that Maggie O'Farrell is a good writer, but she's not a writer for me personally. And then another writer that I won't read again, but I have read in the long ago past, and that is James Patterson. James Patterson writes very formulaic mystery thriller type books, and he has been incredibly successful, but you know, his books had their time and place when I read a few of them. He had a series, I think that was set in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I did, you know, they were just like kind of like candy. I just popped them in and read them, and I can't remember a single thing about them. And it's nothing against James Patterson. He is certainly one of those authors that if you're just looking for a complete escapist read, by all means. But I have other authors I use for that now, and I just think his writing isn't that good and isn't that interesting to make me want to pick up any more of his books. And then the next book series that I'm going to mention may make some people upset, and I'm very sorry in advance, but I will tell you why this is something I'm never going to read, and that is the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have read The Hobbit. I enjoyed The Hobbit. It was fine. But I am not a big fan of epic fantasy novels or series where people go on a journey and they never get anywhere. And the whole book or the whole series is them on this journey. And to me, I'm like, I just want them to get where they're going or go home. Again, this is personally me. I mean, Tolkien's writing is lovely, but again, I'm not a huge fantasy reader. I will read some fantasy. Plus, I've seen the movies. I know what happens. I mean, by the time we got to the third movie, I just wanted to pull all my hair out. I could hardly sit through it. I think I fell asleep in the second movie too. Yeah. It's just not for me, and that's okay. And I know people love it, and you should keep on loving it. And it's not that I won't read Tolkien. I actually have his Letters to Father Christmas that he did for his children, and I love that little book. It is fantastic, but Lord of the Rings isn't for me. And then actually along that same vein, I'm going to throw Game of Thrones in there also. Again, another epic fantasy series, which I don't know that much about. I didn't watch the TV show. It's not something I'm interested in. And I think there's a lot of unlikable characters in that one. Yeah, that's just not something I'm interested in. I mean, I could just say fantasy books in general. I mean, if there's a cozy fantasy series out there that I am missing out on that does not involve a journey, please let me know. I am not opposed to trying fantasy books. Again, it's just not something I am drawn to per se. And then the last book I decided to throw in there because I really couldn't think of anything else, but I'm going to say 50 Shades of Grey and any other subsequent 50 Shades of whatever. I think there are more than just the one book now. Yeah, that's not for me. I mean, doesn't everybody know what the books are about? And so why do I need to read them? Or see the movie for that matter. So, oh, and then I do have one sort of bonus. It's actually not a book or an author, but is a category, which I touched on a little bit when I talked about Hamnet. And that is, I will not read books where there are children in mortal peril or being abused or similar things happening to animals. That's where I draw the line. It's part of the reason I stopped reading thrillers is because so many of them involve children being kidnapped, children being murdered, children, nope. I just, as a mom, it's not for me. Question 10 is, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? Hands down, 100%, if I wrote a book, it would be a coming of age story. That is one of my favorite categories of books to read. It would definitely have a female main character. She would probably be a bit intrepid or plucky. I sort of vacillate between, would I write about a girl who was young, like in the 11 to 13 years old, or would I write her when she's sort of on the cusp of womanhood, like in the 18 to 22-year-old range? I'm leaning more towards the 18 to 22-year-old range now. Sort of the older I get, the more writing about that time period of someone's life appeals to me. But definitely a sort of coming of age, a bit of a slice of life story, just something cozy where nothing super terrible happens, but there's some challenges or things to get through. I don't know. I haven't worked out the exact plot, and I doubt I'll ever write anything, even though I have family members telling me I should. I have lots of ideas that are, oh, that would be neat, but then I don't have them fleshed out in any way, shape, or form. That is it for the reader profile tag. This was really fun. Thank you again, Berna, for tagging me for this. The only thing I have left to do, I think, is tag a few people. I'm going to tag Celeste at A Reader's Almanac, and Heather at Water Bear Reads, and then Anne at In Search of Wonder. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you could hit that like button and then subscribe if you aren't already subscribed to my channel. Again, both of those things really help to grow my channel, help me to bring more bookish content to you. I really appreciate you being here and watching, and definitely leave me some comments down below. Answer some of these questions. I would love to hear your answers, especially for books or authors you would never want to read or have read and would never read again. I'd love to hear those. And I will be back with another video very soon. Bye.